Welcome back to our channel. Like collecting coins? Discover the hidden value in one dime. Like and subscribe for more awesome finds and tips. In the early years of the 1980s, the United States Mint was navigating a period of transition and subtle economic turbulence. Coin production, though routine in its process, was far from immune to the broader implications of budget constraints and evolving material sciences. In 1982, the Mint, amidst a nationwide metal shortage and shifting costs, began phasing out the traditional copper-nickel composition in favor of more economically viable materials for certain denominations. While much attention has always centered around pennies due to their well-documented composition changes, other denominations experienced far less public scrutiny, especially the dime. This period of flux in both materials and minting techniques led to a rare and almost unnoticed anomaly, hidden in plain sight within a denomination people often overlooked. It was not a prominent error marked by a glaring defect or comical misprint. Instead, it was something more subtle, more deceptive, something that would take years to gain recognition. The 1982 dime in question emerged from one of the busiest minting facilities of the era, quietly slipping into circulation along with millions of its counterparts. To the average eye, it bore the same profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the same reeded edge, the same weight and dimensions. But beneath its unassuming surface lay a detail so easily dismissed, it would take an unusually observant eye and a peculiar set of circumstances to bring it to light. For years, it passed through cash registers, vending machines, and soda fountains without drawing a second glance. Only decades later, in a quiet town, nestled within the cluttered drawers of a small-time numismatist, would the coin find the attention it deserved. It was a cloudy afternoon when Ernest Palmer, a retired teacher and self-described coin enthusiast, stumbled upon the dime that would change his understanding of error coins forever. His collection was nothing extravagant, mostly circulated pieces, a few silver finds, and a deep affection for pre-1965 change. He never fancied himself a professional, but he did take pride in cataloging each coin, inspecting its edges and surfaces with a jeweler's loupe passed down from his grandfather. On this particular day, Ernest was sorting through a tin of assorted coins from a flea market haul, miscellaneous change, dusty and ignored, when he found a 1982 Roosevelt dime with something strangely absent. Ernest's eyes squinted beneath the magnifying glass. At first, he thought his eyesight was failing him, that perhaps the dim light was playing tricks. But no, the mark was indeed missing. The mint mark. That tiny letter, usually nestled near the date on the obverse side of the coin, was simply gone. It wasn't worn down or partially stamped. It wasn't obscured by grime or corrosion. It just wasn't there at all. He retrieved another 1982 dime from his reference box and compared them side by side. One had a bold P for the Philadelphia Mint, the other, an unmistakable blank space. Ernest's mind raced, not with excitement, but with skepticism. Was this a forgery? A smoothed-over coin? Or perhaps a well-worn counterfeit? But the edges were sharp. The relief was clear. There were no signs of tampering. He dug into his coin guides, scouring every known variation of Roosevelt dimes. Only one odd listing made brief mention of a 1982 no-P dime, a rarity, a mistake, an anomaly that had caused ripples in small numismatic circles years ago before fading into obscurity. Over the coming weeks, Ernest pored over forums, auction records, and coin shows, clutching the coin in a clear flip protector as if it were an artifact from another dimension. Slowly, the pieces began to form a picture. In 1982, the Philadelphia Mint had, for the first time, begun using mint marks on dimes. Until then, it had been standard for Philadelphia minted dimes to lack any mint mark. But the Mint's new policy was to stamp every dime, including those from Philadelphia, with a P. The transition was swift and went largely unnoticed. However, an early batch of dimes released from Philadelphia missed the mint mark edition entirely. These coins, now known as 1982 no-P Roosevelt dimes, were struck without the mint mark in error, a mechanical oversight likely stemming from a die prepared before the new policy took full effect. What made Ernest's coin more compelling wasn't merely the absence of the mint mark, but the die state, its crispness, the lack of fatigue, the detail in Roosevelt's hair. These were indicators that his coin wasn't struck late in a run, where worn dies might muddle detail. No, this coin came early, perhaps one of the first handful struck by the rogue die. And therein lay its potential value. As word spread and authentication ensued, Ernest's dime became an object of interest. Dealers whispered about it during breaks at coin expos. Collectors began revisiting their old change jars, curious to see if lightning might strike again. Initially, the coin's value fluctuated modestly, offering only a few $100s in early auctions. But over time, as more examples were found, never many, never in large numbers, the demand swelled. Fewer than a few thousand were believed to exist. Some estimates placed the number closer to 2,500, but many numismatists insisted the real count was far lower, citing the narrow window of minting time before the error was caught. In the mid-1990s, a particularly sharp specimen sold for just under $10,000 at a regional auction. Collectors scoffed at the price at the time, dismissing it as an overvaluation for a coin they believed to be a passing curiosity. But a decade later, the tide shifted. As the coin market surged and error coins became a genre of collecting all their own, the 1982 no-P dime re-emerged with force. High-grade examples, especially those certified by top grading agencies, began commanding premiums of $2,000 to $5,000 to $40,000. And then, one evening, during a live online auction filled with spirited bidders, a pristine MS-68 example crossed the $10,000 threshold. The chat window exploded with disbelief. Even more curious were the variants that surfaced. Some 1982 no-P dimes appeared to come from slightly different die states, suggesting that more than one die might have been involved, or that the error persisted longer than previously believed. One such coin bore not only the missing mint mark but also a faint doubling in the torch and olive branches on the reverse. This doubling, dismissed by some as inconsequential, became a subject of hot debate. Was this a secondary error layered on top of the no-P variety? Or was it a red herring? As debate simmered, Ernest, now in his twilight years, watched the value of his accidental finds swell with each passing year. He received offers from major dealers, inquiries from television shows, and even a proposal from a museum seeking a long-term loan. But he hesitated. The coin, for all its growing value, represented more than just profit. It was a reminder of how the smallest details, once ignored, could become symbols of legacy. And then came the twist that no one saw coming. In 2021, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a batch of internal U.S. Mint memos discussing the 1982 no-P error. Hidden within these dry, bureaucratic pages was a paragraph that stunned the numismatic community. It stated that a portion of the no-P dimes were not, in fact, the result of oversight, but of a controlled test. A production manager at the Philadelphia Mint had allegedly instructed a brief run of dimes to be struck without mint marks to monitor die performance against new quality control sensors. These coins were never meant to enter general circulation. They were to be destroyed after testing. But somewhere in the chaos of an overworked staff and overlapping shifts, a sealed bag of test coins was accidentally shipped out with general inventory. The revelation reshaped the entire understanding of the 1982 no-P dime. What was once thought to be a mechanical error became something more complex, part test token, part bureaucratic mishap, part ghost story. This backstory gave the coin a layered mystique. It was no longer just a mistake. It was a whisper of what happens when the lines between experimentation and execution blur. Collectors scrambled to reassess their holdings. Numismatic publications updated their entries, some going so far as to call the 1982 no-P dime one of the most culturally significant mint anomalies of the 20th century. Prices surged again, and this time, they stayed high. Lower-grade versions now fetched thousands. High-grade examples became centerpieces in elite collections, with insurance policies written for amounts once reserved for gold doubloons and ancient rarities. Ernest, now content to leave his treasure to his granddaughter, framed the coin with a small plaque, "A dime's difference can rewrite the past." And somewhere, perhaps in an overlooked corner drawer, another one waits, still hidden, still silent, until the right eyes discover what lies beneath the surface. In 1990, the rhythm of the U.S. Mint's coin production beat steadily forward, synchronized to a well-established process that had endured for decades. The country itself was perched on the edge of technological transformation, with the Cold War fading into memory and the digital age creeping in through the seams. Coinage, one of the oldest symbols of national identity and economy, seemed relatively untouched by such transitions. The Roosevelt dime, in particular, had maintained a visual and structural consistency for nearly 50 years. Most Americans barely noticed it when it clinked into their hands, 10 cents, a forgettable denomination, as ordinary as pocket lint. But nestled within the churn of billions, one particular coin born in 1990 would defy this perception and emerge decades later as a mystery of value and intrigue. Its creation wasn't marked by any grand declaration or dramatic mechanical failure. Instead, its existence hinged on a moment so minor, so fleeting, that few even recognized it had occurred. Somewhere between the preparation of coin dies and the moment the first blank planchets met their metallic fate under immense pressure, something quietly went awry. No alarms were triggered. No records were marked. But a batch of 1990 Roosevelt dimes was released with an omission so subtle, so deceptively simple, that even experienced collectors would miss it at a glance. The Roosevelt dime had been bearing mint marks since the early 1980s, when even coins from the Philadelphia Mint began receiving the small but meaningful P on the obverse. The year 1990 followed suit. Every coin, regardless of origin, was to be appropriately marked with its respective mint designation. But for a small number of dimes, this didn't happen. The P mint mark vanished, not rubbed away, not struck lightly, but simply never applied. These dimes rolled out of the mint, packaged into bags, shipped off to banks, slipped into drawers, and spun across countertops all across the country, indistinguishable from their correctly marked siblings unless someone took a magnifying glass and really looked. One such dime eventually surfaced in the collection of Lila Brenton, a Midwestern coin enthusiast who specialized in error coins and off-metal strikes. She had never considered herself an expert, but her eye for anomalies was sharp. On an early spring morning, while preparing coins for a local educational exhibit at her public library, she began sorting through a roll of Roosevelt dimes she'd purchased from a coin shop liquidation sale. She wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary, perhaps a misaligned die here, a cud mark there. But one coin gave her pause. It was a 1990 Roosevelt dime in surprisingly crisp condition. The date was sharp, the reeded edge well preserved. But something looked off. At first, she couldn't place it. She adjusted her loupe, looked again, and then her heart quickened. Where the mint mark should have been, right next to the date, there was nothing. Just a clean surface, unblemished and untouched, as if the P had never existed. Her first reaction was skepticism. Could it be post-mint damage? A smooth-over job by some prankster with a polishing tool? She examined it under different lighting, then compared it to multiple 1990 dimes in her possession. Every other one had the mint mark clearly stamped in place. Hers did not. It wasn't a worn coin. It wasn't a doctored one. The die had never included the mint mark to begin with. The realization took days to fully sink in. After consulting fellow collectors and reviewing limited references to mint mark errors from that year, Lila discovered that the 1990 No-P Roosevelt dime was a known, albeit rarely documented, anomaly. Reports were scarce, and details inconsistent. Most accounts referenced one or two verified pieces, but the error had never gained the same attention as the 1982 No-P dime. It was as if the coin was hiding in plain sight, shielded by the indifference most people had for change they assumed was always right. Driven by instinct and curiosity, Lila submitted the coin to a professional grading service. The wait for its return was agonizing. Weeks passed. When the coin was finally delivered back to her, sealed in its plastic slab, the certification confirmed her suspicion. 1990 Roosevelt dime, No-P mint mark, mint state 66. An official mint error. From there, the narrative began to evolve. News of the coin's re-emergence stirred online communities. A thread on a popular numismatic forum lit up with speculation. Some dismissed it as just another fluke. Others argued that if more existed, they would have already been found. But a handful of seasoned collectors recognized the potential significance. A second known specimen meant the original error wasn't isolated. It hinted at a forgotten moment inside the Philadelphia Mint, where a die prepared without a mint mark had slipped into use unnoticed. Then came the deeper questions. Was this an intentional test die that accidentally made its way into circulation, as had been rumored about earlier no-P errors? Or was it the result of human error, a die technician failing to apply the mint mark punch during final preparations? The Mint's official records for that year offered no explanation. Silence, even when pressed by collectors and journalists alike. As debates intensified, the coin's value began its ascent. The first public auction listing of a certified 1990 no-P dime sparked mild curiosity, fetching just under $30,000. But by the time a third and fourth example surfaced, including one in remarkable MS-67 condition, the prices had climbed steadily into five-digit territory. A 1990 no-P dime graded MS-68, with immaculate luster and flawless fields, stunned auction watchers by hammering at over $45,000 in 2020. With each new appearance, the 1990 no-P dime's value shifted higher. Not just monetarily, but historically. Collectors started tracing every roll of 1990 dimes they could find, hoping to pluck the next ghost from anonymity. Dealers began offering bounties. One major coin wholesaler publicly offered $25,000 for any verified high-grade example that hadn't yet been certified. Suddenly, what was once an invisible error became one of the most talked-about dime anomalies in modern coinage. But then, another twist sharpened the intrigue. A collector in Oregon submitted a 1990 Roosevelt dime with not only a missing mint mark but also a faint but verifiable doubling on the letters, Liberty. The doubling was so precise, so evenly distributed, that it couldn't be chalked up to post-mint damage. Some experts speculated that it came from a die that had been improperly seated or slightly rotated during initial striking tests. This combination of the missing mint mark and doubling suggested the die might have had multiple irregularities, an ultra-rare confluence of mistakes that, when confirmed, placed this particular coin in a class of its own. Suddenly, attention shifted again. Could the 1990 no-P dime be more than a one-dimensional mint mark omission? Could there be variance within the error, subtypes with distinct markers, each more valuable than the last? The hunt intensified. Collectors weren't just searching for a no-P, they were searching for the no-P with a story, with a twist that made it stand out from the few others like it. Numismatic publications began re-evaluating the coin's profile. What had once been a footnote became a highlighted entry. Auction houses began listing no-P 1990 dimes under special categories. Insurance appraisals soared. Even counterfeiters took notice, forcing grading companies to tighten authentication protocols and issue public warnings against doctored coins mimicking the no-P error. As the years passed, the mystery around the origin of the 1990 no-P dime deepened. The U.S. Mint remained tight-lipped, neither confirming nor denying any internal error during that production cycle. This ambiguity only added to the legend. The story evolved from one of simple error to one of obscured history, an enigmatic misstep frozen in time and nickel-plated copper. By 2025, the market for verified 1990 no-P dimes had solidified into a niche of elite interest. Only a handful of examples were known to exist in higher mint state grades, and demand consistently outpaced supply. At auctions, the coin's presence drew intense attention and lively bidding wars. Several specimens sold privately for amounts never disclosed publicly, with rumors placing their final prices well above documented sales. Today, the 1990 Roosevelt dime missing its mint mark stands not just as a collector's prize, but as a reminder of how even in a system built on uniformity and control, anomalies persist, quietly, defiantly, and often undetected. It is one of the few coins from its era to capture a mix of mystery, rarity, and speculation so potent that its allure transcends mere numismatics. Its value now fluctuates between $45,000 and $110,000, depending on condition, die markers, and provenance. A 10-cent piece, forged without fanfare, now carries the weight of stories, secrets, and the silent thrill of discovery. In 2010, the United States Mint had long since perfected the art of mass production. Coinage was a streamlined operation, supported by decades of technological evolution and rigorous quality control. The Roosevelt dime, with its iconic profile and compact frame, was one of the most reliable denominations produced, rarely the subject of errors or anomalies. Its design, unchanged since 1946, had become a background rhythm in everyday transactions, quietly moving through hands, machines, and drawers with little fanfare. Yet, even in an era governed by digital precision and automated consistency, the unexpected still found a way to surface. A particular dime from 2010 would go on to challenge assumptions, expose vulnerabilities in the minting process, and eventually command awe in the collector's world. The anomaly didn't make headlines when it happened. There were no alarms in the production room, no quality control flags that caught it in time. It was not a coin mangled by striking misalignment or marred by visible cracks. Instead, it was one that appeared, at first glance, completely normal. It bore the familiar portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, clean and dignified. Its reverse depicted the torch, olive branch, and oak branch with the same balance and symbolism as always. But the deception lay in its subtlety. The 2010 dime in question lacked a mint mark entirely, a small letter that should have appeared to the left of the date, silently indicating its origin. By 2010, mint marks were no longer optional. All coins struck at the various U.S. mint facilities were to carry their respective identifiers. A missing mint mark was not only an error, it was a deviation from federal minting standards. And yet, this particular dime managed to evade detection, entering circulation among millions of standard coins with its flaw completely unmarked. For years, it went unnoticed. Then came Arthur Colby, a retired postmaster and longtime coin hobbyist living in a small town in New Hampshire. Arthur had always found comfort in routine, morning walks, crossword puzzles, and carefully sorting through his spare change. He wasn't looking for fortune, just the occasional wheat penny or silver quarter to add to his modest collection. But one evening, under the warm glow of his desk lamp, something about a 2010 dime stopped him. It had a remarkable luster, more so than the usual pocket change. The edges were crisp, the relief unusually sharp. And then he saw it. Or rather, didn't see it. There was no mint mark. At first, Arthur doubted himself. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe the mark had worn off. But no, he pulled out a loupe and examined it closely. The space beside the date was smooth, undisturbed. He retrieved another 2010 dime from his stash. That one bore the expected P for the Philadelphia Mint. He checked a second, and a third. All had mint marks. Except this one. The next morning, Arthur visited the regional coin dealer he'd known for years. The dealer, a younger man named Kean with a background in grading, took one look and grew silent. He handled the coin with care, compared it under magnification, and then exhaled slowly. "If this is what I think it is," he said, "you might have found something incredible." What followed was a journey through verification, authentication, and discovery. Arthur submitted the coin to a top-tier grading company, where it underwent extensive testing and analysis. The verdict came back with a jolt of excitement: 2010 Roosevelt dime, no mint mark, mint error, MS-67. There was no evidence of tampering, no signs of post-mint alteration. This was a legitimate error, a product of a die that had been improperly prepared or improperly used, possibly during an overlap in die maintenance or during a batch test that slipped into regular circulation. What made the discovery more shocking was how modern the coin was. Errors of this nature were thought to be remnants of older, less automated times. But here was proof that even in 2010, amid lasers, scanners, and inspection protocols, human oversight still had room to maneuver. Word of the error spread gradually through online collector forums and coin shows. At first, it was treated with cautious interest. After all, a single no mint mark coin could be a one-off, an isolated mistake. But a few months later, another surfaced in Colorado. This time, a 2010 no mint dime graded MS-66. It carried nearly identical die characteristics, including a faint die crack near the reverse rim. Now there was a pattern. With the confirmation of a second example, interest intensified. Collectors scoured bank rolls, change jars, and coin-counting machines in search of more. Some came up empty. Others reported false leads, coins with worn mint marks or polished surfaces, but genuine examples remained elusive. Over time, a handful of authentic 2010 no-mint mark dimes entered the spotlight, each graded and documented, all in high condition and bearing subtle indicators of a common die lineage. As more surfaced, the era began its slow climb up the ladder of collector prestige. Initial sales reached modest amounts, $300 to $5,000 depending on condition. But the narrative began to shift as major publications picked up on the story. Articles featured headlines like, "The Modern Dime That Wasn't Supposed to Exist," and "Mint Error of the Digital Age." Numismatic journals devoted sections to the peculiar case of the 2010 dime, questioning how such a flaw could emerge in a system that prided itself on eliminating them. Theories emerged. Some believed the coin originated during a training session at the Philadelphia Mint, where a blank die, used for demonstration purposes, was mistakenly used to strike actual coinage. Others speculated that a die without a mint mark had been improperly stored and later misidentified as ready for production. The U.S. Mint offered no formal comment, and its silence only deepened the intrigue, but it wasn't just the mystery that drove interest, it was the coin's rarity and impeccable condition. Unlike older mint errors, which often show signs of circulation, most of the 2010 no-mint mark dimes were found in near-pristine shape. This led some to believe they had been struck, bagged, and dispersed quickly, perhaps from a single shipment to a financial institution in a limited geographic region. The lack of widespread discovery only fueled the sense of urgency. By 2017, auction prices began to reflect the rarity and fascination surrounding the coin. One MS-68 specimen shattered expectations by fetching nearly $35,000 at a live auction, stunning even seasoned collectors. 2 years later, an MS-68 Plus example crossed into the upper echelon of modern mint errors, selling privately for a reported $90,000 to a collector known for curating high-grade anomalies. The most surprising development came when a new variant appeared, an uncirculated 2010 dime not only missing the mint mark but exhibiting a faint, almost ghostly doubling on the motto, "In God We Trust." It was the first of its kind. Some experts believed it was struck with a misaligned die shortly after the mint markless batch, which could suggest the mint caught the mistake mid-run and attempted to correct it, only to cause another brief window of error. This variant, unofficially dubbed the shadow motto, has since become a unicorn in collecting circles, its authenticity still debated but fiercely desired. Collectors now consider the 2010 no-mint mark dime a modern marvel, a reminder that the unexpected can emerge at any time, in any form, even when no one is looking. It's not just about the missing letter. It's about what the absence represents, the thin line between order and chance, precision and oversight. As of today, this unusual 2010 Roosevelt dime with its absent mint mark commands a staggering valuation, ranging from $35,000 to $90,000 depending on condition and provenance. A 10-cent piece born from silence, whose small omission speaks volumes in the world of those who listen closely.